And it was 3 people I knew very well, all went ill after having the booster. All 3 of them only had the booster, otherwise they couldn't travel. This was the madness. Why did the government insist you had to travel when they knew at the time? We now know Fauci knew very, very early on that the vaccine did not prevent transmission. Yet he insisted all school children had it to look after other people. It was all madness. The great psychosis was going on here. Possibly worse, but that's the kind version.
Kindest way to put it, yeah.
But to me, this was strongly suggestive. It was perturbating, i.e. upsetting an immune response that was controlling the cancer, where the T cell is dominant. The T cell's dominant. And the vaccine should have been T-cell dominant. They weren't. They induced T-cell responses, but purely by chance. It wasn't by design. And they upset that T-cell response, which is why the cancers escaped. And remember, they were under control because all these people had been sort of cured by immunotherapy long before, as I said, it became popular and was accepted. So I knew then it was perturbating. It was like my model, where the 3rd and 4th vaccine caused more harm and allowed underlying diseases to take off. And that's what other people were seeing. And so we were asked to prove it. Well, I didn't have the resources to prove it, but it didn't take very long before other people were saying that the T-cell response is suppressed or exhausted. I like that word used. It said the T-cells are exhausted after the 3rd shot, the first booster, and more exhausted even when you have the 4th and 5th. So why on earth are we still bullying? Even my own practice is bullying us to go and get a spring booster to just set you right for the summer. It's unbelievable.
Well, it's worse than unbelievable now, given that what we know now, it's beyond professional negligence now. It's just,
and very good people, immunologists who've followed these patients, they've noticed that the T-cell suppression, the virtual wipeout, is even worse in cancer patients. And then they wonder why these cancer patients are becoming turbo cancer patients, because they've got no control left. And so now we know there's many other reasons. The other paper, which I thought was really, really important, was one just looking at the immunoglobulin switches. So IgG1 and 3, these are the ones that neutralize and produce a complement for cell killing, for the B cell activity, what have you. But after the booster, people were saying they were monitoring this because they were looking for neutralizing antibodies, cross-reactive, and they suddenly said, hey, wait a minute, there's been an IgG switch. They've switched to class 4. Now, class 4 is what you get when you tolerize. So you tell the immune system, and this is what you want in kidney transplants, liver transplants, you program the system through various medications, etc., to induce IgG class 4 so it tolerizes, it doesn't reject. So we were using the booster vaccines to tolerize patients' cancer so they wouldn't reject them. So those are 2 main reasons why they pop out.
So what was happening in the past was the T cells. These are the T lymphocytes, the cells that can actually destroy cancer cells, dropping noxious chemicals on them and killing them in a wonderful way. They were doing this job, but then the vaccine was suppressing that T cell response. Therefore, there was nothing left to keep the cancer down. So if there's nothing to keep the cancer down, it just takes off.
Yeah. I mean, that's my very simple interpretation in a nutshell. Obviously, the amazing thing about the immune system, it's unbelievably complex. So you have to simplify it in order to understand it. The T-cell responses are slightly more complex than just the T-cell because there's the one that's trained and recognise the cancers and keep it under control. But there's the innate immune system, which is the front line attack, and they will attack anything that doesn't look quite right. And actually, we think some of these, a thing called gamma delta T cells, are probably the most important of the lot. But anyhow, it looks like the vaccines are suppressing all of these frontline aspects of the immune system. So you don't have to look any further, really, to see what on earth is causing this. But as we now know, others are coming up with many other raisons d'etre of how the boosters can actually stimulate and drive the cancer, let alone just take the brakes off, as it were.
Yeah. So this switch in the IgG, so these IgGs are the immunoglobulins. These are the immune proteins made by the B lymphocytes, and they're supposed to be fighting infection. With repeated exposure, I suppose you get much the same. This is why we're not all allergic to peanuts and things like that. We want to tolerate these things. Or your example of a kidney transplant, we want to tolerate it, where you want to promote these immunoglobulin type 4s, which actually reduce the immune system. And therefore, they are reducing the immunosurveillance of cancers and, ironically, the immunosurveillance of viruses as well.
Exactly. And now this is another reason that people have noted to me, and this is all again being published by several sources, is that people who get the boosters, they seem to go down with COVID and other infections remarkably quickly, and more so than they ever did before. And one which has occurred to me walking around my environ social club, sports club, etc., a number of people who basically said, I was perfectly well till I had that booster, and it's been bloody awful. I've had shingles ever since. Well, we now know that is a major thing, and it's the same thing. It's upset the finely tuned immune regulation of all these viruses.
So again, shingles, ongoing viral infection, normally kept down by the immune system, and so well recognised in all aspects of healthcare that any time someone's immunosuppressed, the shingles can come out. It's just classic, isn't it? That can happen.
It's absolutely classic. So that alone by itself says the booster is immune suppressing these people, because they're coming out with new infections, often called new COVID or some other virus, and sometimes just very, very unwell with all sorts of things, including shingles and COVID, and autoimmune diseases of all descriptions. I mean, people have described to me after getting the booster the most bizarre autoimmune conditions, which I have to think very hard which one they're most like that I've been taught and fits into a box, but they're clearly autoimmune driven conditions, which we know when you take they interfere with the immune system, you do start to get unwanted responses because they're normally suppressed and controlled by the T-cell police, as I would call it.
Yeah. And it could be that we're seeing new pathological histologies, really, autoimmune reactions against tissues which we didn't really see in the traditional autoimmune disease profile boxes, as you say. But now it's kind of open season. And the other thing that's really concerning, I've had a lot of people writing in, and a tragic case from my own personal experience, leukemia. Do you feel there's more leukemia in young people around than there has been in the previous years?
Without a doubt. I mean, after I noticed the melanoma in my clinic, I noticed people not at the hospital initially, in fact, even friends and family, had been diagnosed with a leukemia or a lymphoma after the boosters. And I then went to another place where I knew people that worked there, and I just said to someone, by the way, how are you? I haven't seen you for a while. And they said, I've come up in all sorts of lumps, and they don't know exactly what it is, but they think it's a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they're investigating. And I said, one of the stupidest things that an oncologist could possibly say that. And I said, God, that's a shock. I wonder what on earth caused that. I don't know why I said it. And this person said, oh, my oncologist told me it's entirely due to the booster vaccine. They're seeing loads of them. And she said, I already know 3 other people in my circle who've had the lymphoma or leukemia since their boosters. Now, these are major alerts, and they were all reported to the MHRA and the usual suspects. Get no reply. I mean, this is gross dereliction of duty of a grand scale. I've mentioned before, when you realise that the 1970 flu in America, they rolled a vaccine out because it was killing people in their 20s and 30s and their soldiers. It was a real national emergency. And people said, I think there's some increase in Guillain-Barré going on, this ascending paralysis that occurs with has been noted with other vaccines. But the incidence went up. The FDA, which is staffed by sensible people then, said, if that's the case, we better look into it. And they looked into it and they said, my God, it's true. And then they said, has the virus changed, as all viruses do? Nobody's dying of it anymore. Kill it. And that's what we should have done with the COVID vaccine 2 years ago. We should have killed it. There was more than enough evidence. But they sat by, I see no ships, nothing to see here, go away. It's unbelievable.
So leukemia can be a pretty frightening disease, disease of the white blood cells, cancer of the white blood cells, and lymphoma, the other one you mentioned, lymph tumours developing from the lymphocytes.
Yeah. Well,
do leukemia and lymphoma present in similar ways?
Well, the majority, over 90% of these, are B-cell lymphocyte-driven diseases. And why would they appear after a third totally unnecessary booster? Is because that booster is designed to flog a dying horse, i.e. the B cells, and give them extra growth factors to produce more antibodies. So what they're doing is they're releasing extra stimulating factors and also having removed the T cell response. Because a lot of leukemias, lymphomas, they basically are seen in immunodeficiency status. In fact, a supreme example was one of my other lives, was HIV. We actually saw all these lymphomas pop up because the T cell response had been destroyed by HIV. So it's another example.